Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about the Fantasy Football Week 9 wide receiver rankings. I'm going to be going over my 4 starts of the week at the wide receiver position while also giving you guys some statistics on the best matchups so that you can either decide to play specific wide receivers or perhaps sit them for this coming week. I'm also going to be following it with my top 36, 1 through 36 wide receiver rankings for Week 9 of the fantasy football season. Now, without further ado, I just want to thank all of you who have subscribed. Continue to like, comment, and share my videos with your friends, family, and random people. Anyway, either way, I just want to thank you guys for that. And without further ado, let's get into the wide receiver segment of the week. Hey, everybody, how's it going? All right, so we're sitting here and we're going over my 2 starts, or the first 2 starts at the wide receiver position for this week, Week 9 of the fantasy football season. We've got here Devin Funchess and Marvin Jones Jr. Now, we'll talk about Devin Funchess first, obviously. So why is Devin Funchess a start of the week? Number one, it's absolutely because of his matchup. He plays against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and this is really a thing for all. This is more of an advertisement for all Panthers for this coming week. The Panthers have a fantastic matchup. We saw the Cincinnati Bengals, who struggled against the Kansas City Chiefs, turn around, put up 37 points against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. This defense absolutely atrocious these last couple weeks. In all honesty, the entire season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense has been terrible. So this is pretty much an advertisement for Devin Funchess. Maybe DJ Moore, for sure Christian McCaffrey, Greg Olsen, and Cam Newton. But either way, specifically Devin Funchess, why is he going to have a great week? Well, Tampa Bay Buccaneers have given up the second most points to the wide receiver position thus far this season. They're giving up 39.29 points to the wide receiver position. That counts all the wide receivers that play. And Devin Funchess is the clear number 1 for the Carolina Panthers. So going into this week, he's going to have a very great opportunity. Here's the thing about Devin Funchess. This past week, he didn't have a great game, notably because they played against the Ravens defense. And the Ravens defense, they have a great secondary, be able to clamp down. They have a great defense in general, right? Yet the Carolina Panthers at home were the superior team, ended up scoring a good amount of points on their opponent. Devin Funchess still is the number 1 wide receiver. Target-wise this season, 9 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets, 8 targets, 11 targets. He has the opportunity. He will continue to get the opportunity as the season progresses because he's the number 1 wide receiver here. Going into such a great matchup, Devin Funchess, in my opinion, despite what he did last week, should be a start on your team this week, especially with all the players that are out on bye weeks. We're going to be missing a lot of wide receivers. The rankings will be a little condensed because of the fact that there's not as many options to go through. So Devin Funchess, if you weren't already, for sure a start of the week, a guy you should be confident in playing this coming week. And that goes for all Carolina Panthers this week, but primarily Devin Funchess at the wide receiver position. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about Marvin Jones Jr., a guy that prior to this week, he was ranked a couple times this season, but last week was not in my top 36, and rightfully so in my opinion. Marvin Jones has not completely been dependable this season. Prior to this last week, in which he had 7 receptions for 117 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns, Marvin Jones has put up a 4.4 point week, 7.3, 7.1 in the 3 weeks prior. He just wasn't looking great. He didn't look like Marvin Jones of 2017. Marvin Jones of 2017 was a wide receiver 1. He was a guy that had 1,100 plus receiving yards, had 9 receiving touchdowns, had about 67 plus receptions, over 100 targets. He wasn't getting the influx that he got last season because of the boost to Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay earlier on in the season, he was able to step up. He had a couple good games, and it was forcing the Lions to use Kenny Golladay as that number 2 receiver. But we all know that the Lions receivers at some point, they were all just eating into each other's fantasy reliance and outcomes. So the trade of Golden Tate to the Philadelphia Eagles this past week may be one of the it honestly, going forward for the rest of the season, it may be one of the most valuable moves, because you could be sitting on Marvin Jones as we speak and thinking, as at least last week this time, you could have been thinking, well, Marvin Jones, am I starting him? Am I dropping him? Is he worth playing? And now going forward, he's a guy that is a start, in my opinion, every single week going forward, because the opportunity he's going to have. I don't even care about the matchup. I understand they play against the Vikings this week in Xavier Rhodes. But as of right now, I'm supremely confident in the opportunity that Marvin Jones Jr. is going to have going forward. Also, Kenny Galladay, he's going to get a little bit of a boost as well. But we've seen over the last couple of weeks, Marvin Jones and Kenny Galladay have not been consistent enough, and neither has Golden Tate, because the running game of the Lions has begun to, feed into or take away from Matthew Stafford's ability to throw the ball downfield. We're used to seeing Matthew Stafford throw the ball 50 times. Now that we aren't, because Kerryon Johnson is beginning to get more and more acclimated with this offense, and they're becoming a more balanced team, I still see Marvin Jones, especially this week and going forward. This guy is an absolute monster because of his size, his ability to make plays in the red zone, and because of his familiarity with Matthew Stafford. That's the thing he has over Kenny Galladay. Kenny Galladay in his second year isn't as familiar or doesn't have as much rapport as Marvin Jones does. That's why I have way more confidence within him this week and going forward rest of the season. It's incredible. I'm not kidding. Many of you will have season-changing. There's potential that Marvin Jones can win you the league because of this, because of the trade that was done with Golden Tate. He could be the missing link to your team, could help you out, and I hope so. Either way, this week, very confident in his matchup. I understand many of you may be hesitant on the Minnesota defense that really hasn't given up many points in the passing game, but I like it. I like Marvin Jones, and I'm ready for the challenge. All right, let's talk about the next two guys for this coming week. Here we are. We have DeSean Jackson and we have Tyler Lockett. DeSean Jackson specifically, again, as I talked about with Devin Funchess, playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, all the Panthers are going to be relevant this week. But here's the thing about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. Now that Ryan Fitzmagic is back, I honestly feel like DeSean Jackson, obviously Mike Evans, O.J. Howard, and Chris Godwin, they all get a boost in production because Ryan Fitzmagic, he's something special. And thus far this season, when he was the starting quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we saw something that no other quarterback was able to do. This man was throwing for 400 yards a game and lighting it up. When DeSean Jackson, was a wide receiver and under center was Ryan Fitzpatrick, the first 3 games of the season, DeSean Jackson was able to produce, and I quote, are you ready for this? Week 1, 5 receptions for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns. Week 2, 4 receptions, 129 receiving yards and a touchdown. Week 3, not as great, only had 3 receptions for 37. And week 4, 5 receptions, 112 receiving yards. Now, what does this exactly tell you? And here's the thing, too. DeSean Jackson, he came out and he publicly said to the Tampa Bay organization, hey, I want to be traded. I don't like playing with Jameis. I don't think that my talents are being used at its maximum capacity. I want to be traded, right? So he called out for a trade. Obviously, that didn't go through. The trade deadline has passed. But his combination with Ryan Fitzmagic, we saw it work time in and time out earlier on this year. There is an obvious chemistry between the two, and they want to continue to hook up and try to find touchdowns, 70-plus yards or more. And this coming week, I don't think that they're going to shy away from that. I think they're going to go after that. I expect it on the first drive for Ryan Fitzmagic to try to start off quickly and for him to try to go deep to DeSean Jackson. And there's a good possibility because it only takes one play. DeSean Jackson only needs that 60-yard touchdown and 60-yard reception touchdown to be fantasy relevant. And I think he's going to be able to do that. Ryan Fitzmagic all the way, baby. And that's D-Jax for you. So let's move on to the last start of the week for week 9 of the fantasy football season. We're going to talk about Tyler Lockett. And, here's the thing. Really quickly, even without Tyler, let me go back to DeSean Jackson before we get into Tyler Lockett. Even without Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? DeSean Jackson has been good. The other weeks that he's played, overall, obviously he was insane with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but without him, 10 points against Atlanta, 10 points against Cleveland, and 14.7 points this past week against Cincinnati. He has still been a good wide receiver. He's having one of his best years that we've seen in a while. 600 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns on 43 receptions. 26 receptions. The dude has been playing out of his mind. So it's not, too far out there to believe that he's going to have a good week. Goodness gracious, this thing is going to kill my ear. It's not too far out there to think that he's going to have himself a good week. We've seen him do it before, and as long as he's given the opportunity and the exposure, I think he'll be able to continue. He's a for sure start this week. Anyway, let's move on now to Tyler Lockett, okay? Now, here's the thing about Tyler Lockett. For those of you who own Tyler Lockett, you may be thinking, well, he's been great for me all season long. Dude's a double-digit point per game. But can I trust him this coming week? Here's the thing about Tyler Lockett. His targets, his receptions, they are not high enough, and they're not at a capacity to where you can confidently start him every single week. Literally every week, he's a 3 to 5 reception kind of guy. Week 1, 3, 5, 4, 5, 3, 3, 2. Those are his reception counts for the 8 games that the Seahawks have played, the 7 games that the Seahawks have played this season. It's nothing that you should be proud of comparatively to other guys like Thielen that are getting 10 receptions a game. Yet, Tyler Lockett, in half-point PPR, full-point PPR, even in standard because of the touchdowns he scored, he's been absolutely relevant. And it's kind of scary because he's pretty much turned into the number 1 wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks, and Doug Baldwin is onto the wayside. Having 400 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns thus far, Tyler Lockett is a consistent wide receiver, plain and simple. This coming week, you may be thinking, okay, against the Detroit Lions, he wasn't able to do much, only had 2 receptions and was saved by that touchdown. Can I trust him? I still think you should absolutely be playing this guy. Going forward, it's just, he has that little niche with Russell Wilson. Just like David Moore, the other wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks, they both are the red zone threats as of right now. And Tyler Lockett being able to be like DeSean Jackson next to him and go over the top of the defense and make that simple play in order to take the top off, score a 70-yard touchdown, and have himself, already 13-plus points on the week. I think the diversity, the ability of Tyler Lockett is what you're starting. And to be honest, yes, his opportunity doesn't look like much when it comes to targets and receptions, but he continues to perform, and I think you continuously have to roll him out and start him as a wide receiver 2-3 especially this coming week. Anyway, those are my starts of the week. Let's move on to a couple statistics that I want to go over. Plain and simple, let's check this out. All right, so for fantasy points against, this is basically how many points a specific defense gives up to the wide receiver position on average on a weekly basis. Obviously, the New Orleans Saints have given up the most points to the wide receiver position. Even this past week, Adam Thielen, Stefon Diggs, they were able to tear it up, even though the Vikings weren't able to produce much. As I mentioned before, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they give up a boatload of points. Now, you may be thinking, okay, the Atlanta Falcons, they give up 38.5 points per week to the wide receiver position. Should I be looking into starting a receiver within the offense of the Redskins, considering the Redskins play the Atlanta Falcons this week? Let's be honest, okay? Prior to this season, we all thought Jamison Crowder would be able to be a decent enough start. Maybe even Chris Thompson, maybe even Jordan Reed. Yet we haven't seen that. This offense has been running the ball more than any other team in the NFL, or close to any other team in the NFL. I think they're in the top 5 in rushing attempts thus far this season. They're a team that's going to continue to run the ball. Yes, they have a very good matchup against this defense of the Atlanta Falcons that's pretty beat up, all things considered, with all the injuries that they've had. But I don't think that there is a wide receiver that is on the Redskins right now, whether it's Paul Richardson, Josh Doxson, who had the most receptions this past week. Jordan Reed's a different story because tight ends are few and far between. But at the wide receiver position, I don't see anything. Cincinnati's on a bye week. Eagles are on a bye week. Pittsburgh Steelers, who plays against Pittsburgh? The good old Ravens. You'll see it in the rankings. It looks good for John Brown. John Brown has shown that, he's pretty dependable against this specific matchup, and so is Michael Crabtree. The Jets, another team. So here's the thing about the Jets, right? The Jets give up a lot of points to the wide receiver position. So you may be thinking, if Brocktober, well, we're still in Brocktober, but if Brock Osweiler ends up starting again, which I expect him to do because Ryan Tannehill's shoulder is probably not at exactly where they need it to be. But as of right now, Brocktober, good old Brock Osweiler, is giving them a pretty good opportunity to win games. He's not terrible, not as bad as we thought he could potentially be. But Adam Gase, the quarterback whisperer, has figured it out. He's got him, not throwing too many picks, not throwing any picks, to be honest. I don't know. Has he thrown a pick yet? Honestly, not paying attention to it. Don't really have to. It's Brock Osweiler. But at the wide receiver position for the Miami Dolphins, right, you have Amendola, you have Kenny Stills, and you have DeVante Parker. Here's the tricky thing about those three. I have no clue where the ball's going to go. I want to assume that Danny Amendola is going to get the ball. But at the same time, I'm very uncertain. This is an offense that is, in my opinion, very just volatile. There's a chance they come out and get completely destroyed. There's a chance they come out and all three of these wide receivers have a touchdown. I'm not sure exactly what the outcome is going to be, but as of right now, between the three, I mean, it's got to be like Danny Amendola with the best opportunity out of the slot. Anyway, it's round out top 10. We have the Bears. Nobody on the Bills is starting. Please do not. The Browns, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to tear apart the Browns defense. And the 49ers, as I mentioned before, Derek Carr is not a bad play. I'll get into that a little bit later. Anyway, so let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Look at that. Dallas Cowboys secondary clamping down. Whew, they're a good streaming play, guys. Anyway, so this is all just for your, absorption. This is for the first 8 weeks of the regular season. How many points specific teams give up in the passing game to the wide receiver position specifically. I mean, it's pretty insane that some of these teams only give 100 yards on average up to the wide receiver position. It's pretty crazy. I mean, Carolina's doing great. Look at that. The Texans, the Colts. How are the Colts? I thought the Colts secondary was trash, right? But either way, they're on a bye week. But anyway, this is for your consumption. Do with it as you may. And that's pretty much it. Also, this is for half-point PPR scoring. So let's just go ahead and move on to the wide receiver rankings for Week 9 of the fantasy football season. And, I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier today with the running back video, some of these are going to be easier to convince you guys to start because obviously some of these guys are complete monsters and they continue to just on a weekly basis ball out. Really quickly, just want to pull up some stats. Okay, so through 8 weeks of the fantasy football season, Adam Thielen is the number one wide receiver with 165 half-point PPR scoring points. He's 20 points above the next available wide receiver, who is Tyreek Hill, who has scored 145 fantasy points. So he's got a 20-point lead on him. Not bad. Not as big as the difference between Todd Gurley and Saquon Barkley, which was 50 total points, but Todd Gurley's something else. Anyway, let's go over this. We have number one this week, Adam Thielen, as I mentioned, 165 fantasy points, half-point PPR thus far. The guy's an absolute animal. 8 games in a row with 100-plus yards. I mean, goodness gracious. This past week was, he didn't even have that many targets this past week. Barely got over that 100-yard mark. But the way I see it, plays Detroit this week. Detroit are probably going to put Darius Slay either on him or Stefon Diggs, probably on Stefon Diggs majority of the time, considering they use Thielen in the slot here and there. But Thielen is matchup proof. He's a 100% start. In my opinion, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL as we speak. He's just been doing it on a consistent enough basis to where you have to be confident in him on a weekly basis. He is absolutely a monster. He's my number one this week. Number 2, Antonio Brown, playing against a tough matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. I have 100% confidence within Antonio Brown. I have a lot of confidence within the Steelers offense. I understand they weren't able to perform up to their standards last time they played the Ravens this year, and they played them at home. This week, they have to go into Baltimore, and they have to perform in order to get a win within their division against the team, the Ravens, who, this last week took an unfortunate loss. They're going to try to recover from that by trying to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's going to be a good game, but Antonio Brown's still my number 2 wide receiver going into this week. Number 3, we have the return of Julio. off the bye week. Julio Jones. Playing against... Okay, so here's the thing. This is the only question. The question is because if you guys don't know, Clinton Dix, the safety for the Green Bay Packers, was traded to the Washington Redskins earlier yesterday. That pretty much bolsters up the secondary of the Redskins. The question is this Redskins defense? I mean, we know they're a good defense, but are they good enough to stop the offense of the Atlanta Falcons? That is the question. In my opinion, I still believe that Julio Jones, a guy that has been doing it week in and week out, one of the best wide receivers. Yes, he hasn't caught a touchdown, all right? We understand that. Where's Julio on this list? Julio, oh goodness, man. Julio hasn't scored that many points. Whew. But hey, listen, the guy continues to perform. Even on limited amount of the points he has, he's only scored 100 points in half-point PPR scoring leagues. It doesn't look great, but that's what happens when you don't score touchdowns. You can only get so much. But even then, I still think with the Washington Redskins improving their secondary, I still think Julio's going to get his. He's my number 3 for that reason. I mean, he's just too dominant. He gets too many targets. And, I mean, he's just this. He is this offense, pretty much. Other than Matt Ryan, he is the offense. All right, let's go to number 4, Davante Adams. Okay, let's be real. Davante Adams has been on another level this season. Obviously, being the number 1 wide receiver for this team because Jordy Nelson disappeared, got himself shipped off to the Raiders. Obviously, that makes a huge difference. But as of this season, dude has been on fire. He's plus, 15 points a week in PPR? This guy's absolutely tearing it apart. Even in this last week, without a touchdown, was able to rack up 16 fantasy points in half-point PPR. This coming week against the New England Patriots, it's a great matchup. And to be honest, the Packers are going to continue to have to throw the ball. And Davante Adams continues to be a red zone threat for this team. So, how many touchdowns has he scored so far this season? Dude has scored 6 touchdowns in the first 7 games of the season because they had a bye week. I just see that continuing to improve. He's going to be a top 5 wide receiver by the end of the season. That is a given. All right, let's go ahead and move on to my next guy, number 5, DeAndre Hopkins. Here's the thing about D-Hop. We all know he's fantastic. We know that for sure. We saw it last week. We saw it the week before. We've seen it all season long and last season. All he needs is a great quarterback. He has that. Deshaun Watson is there, ready to deliver the ball to him. The only question is, will this Denver defensive line get to Deshaun Watson before he can get the ball out? We've seen what this Denver defensive line has been able to do. Derek Wolfe, goodness gracious, Domata Pico, if I'm not mistaken, Von Miller, Bradley Chubb. Dude, these guys are going to get after it. Shane Ray coming off the edge. They're going to get after him. We know for a fact that the offensive line of the Texans is one of the worst, if not the worst in the NFL. Deshaun Watson's having to play with a pretty downgraded offensive line comparatively to some of these other quarterbacks in the league. Obviously, he has legs, which is going to help him. But is he going to have trouble this week in the matchup? I think he might face some trouble. I don't think it's going to affect DeAndre Hopkins to a point where we're sliding him out of the top 10 because he's just such a great talent. He's a guy that's going to end up finding himself open multiple times this game. He's going to be fantasy relevant. He's my number 5. All right, number 6, Mike Evans. All right, so what are we doing with Mike Evans this week? We have Ryan Fitzpatrick starting. We're already, as I mentioned before, DeSean Jackson should be a start this week for many of you. Mike Evans is no different. When Ryan Fitzpatrick came into the game this past week, boom, 75-yard touchdown to Mike Evans of all people. Mike Evans is a receiver that's not really known for his yards after the catch. And guess what? He had himself a nice 30-yard pass and ran in an extra 40. So being able to find a guy open like that, whether it's a broken play or not, I don't really care. Ryan Fitzpatrick was able to come in the second half and have, 24 fantasy points in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues, 2 touchdowns, 200-plus passing yards. Dude was insane. Mike Evans gets a 100%. I don't know if this is technically a boost. Because he's being ranked. I ranked in the same this past week pretty much. I don't think the quarterback really makes a difference, but I know that Ryan Fitzpatrick can get this offense moving way more, and he's not going to turn over the ball. So he definitely helps Mike Evans in that sense. All right, so let's go to move on. Number 7, Michael Thomas for the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans Saints played against the Rams this week. The Rams have been pretty good, But Michael Thomas is matchup proof. I mentioned this earlier this season multiple times. Him and Drew Brees, they're matchup proof. The other wide receivers within this offense, they're not really going to be able to do much, in my opinion. I mean, we haven't seen Traquan Smith, which we thought the last couple weeks should have been great. Had good matchups, had good opportunities. They scored a lot of points, but yet they're just not able to produce. Drew Brees isn't getting them as many targets as you would expect because they're running the ball consistently through Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. I mean, that's pretty much it. Alvin Kamara is becoming the number 2 wide receiver. We didn't even see Ben Watson use this past week. So it's pretty much just Michael Thomas, Kamara, and Mark Ingram. So Michael Thomas, he's my number 7. All right, number 8, we have Tyreek Hill playing against, as I mentioned before, a very, very terrible secondary that has given up, the 8th most points to the wide receiver position in half-point PPR thus far this season. Tyreek Hill, he's dealing with a hamstring injury. Here's the issue. If he ends up, being downgraded to out by any, some imagination or some sort, obviously Sammy Watkins gets a boost. We saw Sammy Watkins this past week. I'll get into him a little bit more a little bit later on in the rankings. But as of right now, Tyreek Hill, fully healthy, going against his defense. He'll take the top off. He'll find himself some touchdowns and fantasy value. He's number 8. Number 9, Stefon Diggs. There it is, guys. I told you he'd be great last week. Matchup-wise, had himself a pretty easy time against that defense. What did he have? All right, he had 11 targets, 10 receptions, 119 receiving yards, and a touchdown, 22.9 fantasy points and half-point PPR. Had a fantastic week this last week. And are we surprised? Not really. Going forward, I mean, here's the thing. The Vikings have 2 number 1 wide receivers. They have 2 of the top 10 wide receivers in fantasy football as of right now. The options for Kirk Cousins, they're a lot easier than they were last season. Yes, he's not performing to the standard that we expected him to, especially me. I've been preaching, okay, Kirk Cousins every single week, but he hasn't been able to, fulfill the specific, statistics I thought he was going to be able to fill out the stat sheet. So as of right now, still, Stefon Diggs, Adam Thielen, they're 2 number 1 wide receivers on the same team playing against Detroit this week. You can only cover one with Darius Slay, so we'll see how this goes. Either way, he's my number 9. Number 10, Keenan Allen. Welcome back from the bye week. You go ahead. You're going to play against the Seattle Seahawks defense. Keenan Allen, please do us all a favor. Have yourself a good week. Last time we saw Keenan Allen, he was kicking end zone pylons because he wasn't getting targets in the end zone, and Mike Williams was dropping touchdowns in the end zone. As of right now, Keenan Allen, hopefully, after this bye, he's gotten his mind right. He's gotten Phillip Rivers into a room, and he's spoken to him and said, hey, Phillip, I need the rock. My fantasy owners depend on me. If I ain't getting fantasy points, then how are they going to draft me next year? Who's going to talk about me? Huh? And then he's like, you know what? I understand, Keenan. We're going to figure it out. Hopefully that conversation has been had. I'm aware, Mike Williams, Tyrell Williams, they're taking up a lot of the fantasy points with the big plays they make, but I still think Keenan Allen needs to get his 10-plus targets, maybe even 10-plus receptions a week in order to help this offense out. He's my number 10 this week. All right, number 11, Emmanuel Sanders. It only helps Sanders that much more that Demaryius Thomas is now gone. Courtland Sutton is going to be in the game. He's going to get his opportunity. But to be honest, I really think this helps Emmanuel Sanders. It doesn't help Emmanuel Sanders as much as, Marvin Jones is getting helped out, because we know Emmanuel Sanders has been fantastic all season long. He's been a number 1 wide receiver all year long. Whether he's passing the ball, running in touchdowns, or, catching the ball like he normally does, he's been fantastic this season. So do we think, Emmanuel Sanders is going to be downgraded because Courtland Sutton? No, absolutely not. He's going to be just as good, if not better. He might get more targets, more receptions. That's all we need. I've been preaching it for the last month now. You just got to give Emmanuel Sanders at least 14 targets. That's it. That's easy. It's easy. And they're going to go ahead and do that. All right, let's move on. Number 11, we have Robert Woods. Now, of all the receivers for the Rams, I think it just depends. If Cooper Kupp ends up playing, which I 100% expect him to do so, it's going to hurt Robert Woods and Brandin Cooks, but not in the way that you may think. I think it's going to hurt them in targets, but I think in opportunity, when you have to cover 3 deadly wide receivers and Todd Gurley out of the backfield, it makes it that much harder on the defensive coordinator for the Saints and the defensive players. They're going to have to, they're juggling pretty much. They've got to figure out where do they want to stop the bleeding from. They want to stop it out of the backfield, or they want to cover Cooper Kupp in the slot, Robert Woods, in the medium range, or Brandin Cooks over the top. They've got to pick their poison, because all of these pieces within this Rams offense, one of the best offenses in the NFL, they're going to hurt this New Orleans defense. New Orleans defense has given up the most points to the wide receiver position through the first 8 weeks of the fantasy football season. So Robert Woods, in my opinion, I think he has the best opportunity within all of the wide receivers, and therefore he's my number 12 this coming week. All right, number 13, we have Juju Smith-Schuster. Here's the thing about Juju. Let's go ahead and find Juju's stats, shall we? Shall we begin? All right, Juju. Here's the deal. All right, I'm just a little worried because I mentioned before this season that Juju Smith's statistics and his box score is highly going to depend on James Conner's production, okay? It's very, very contingent on how well James Conner does. If James Conner continues to be great, all right, it's going to hurt Juju Smith because the Steelers, they really want to run the ball. They've got the offensive line to do so. They've got the scheme to do so, and they're going to do so just as long as James Conner is consistently successful, right? They don't need Le'Veon Bell. We don't need that anymore. So that's the thing. If the run game is completely working, then expect Juju not to be used. But this coming week, if there was any week that the Steelers were going to have a tough time running the ball, it's against the Ravens, the team that has given up the least points to the running back position on a weekly basis. This coming week, I think Juju Smith gets a little bit of a boost in that fact because if they're not able to run the ball consistently, as in the Steelers, they're not able to run the ball consistently, they're going to be forced into 3rd and long situations where Juju will be called upon. His number will be called upon. He'll get the targets. He'll get the receptions and hopefully be my number 13, which he is in fantasy football. So for sure, fire him up. All right, number 14. As I mentioned, one of my starts of the week, I think it was my first start of the week, Marvin Jones. I mean, without a doubt in my mind, Marvin Jones has gotten he went from being unranked in my rankings because of how poor he was performing to having a great performance, then them trading away their number 1 receiver when it comes to receptions in the last couple seasons, right? In a quick, 30 hours or so, 36 hours or so, everything switched. Marvin Jones went from being a mediocre receiver in fantasy to had a great week to being, oh my God, Marvin Jones is going to be doing it week in and week out like he did last season, and that he's proven to do with the Lions, with the Bengals, his entire career. This coming week, I'm not worried about it. He's my start of the week. He's my number 14. Number 15, Brandin Cooks, the next wide receiver for the Rams. Cooper Kupp's going to be good, right? But then again, so is Brandin Cooks, so is Robert Woods. I'm just a little bit more convinced that Robert Woods has a better opportunity. I understand Brandin Cooks can just as easily take the top off the defense, just like John Brown did a couple weeks ago. We know that this defense is susceptible to the passing game. I still think he's going to have a great game. I don't think Robert Woods and Brandin Cooks are separated by that many fantasy points technically. That's why they're pretty ranked. They're close. They're ranked pretty close to one another. Excuse me. And he's my number 15 this week. All right. Number 16, my second start of the week for my rankings. We have Devin Funchess, plays in a fantastic matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, who's given up the second most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. As the number 1 wide receiver, and like I mentioned before, Devin Funchess is going to get the targets. He's going to get the receptions. He's going to have an easy time. And this offense is just going to blow through that defense. So if you're a Graham Gano owner, you might not want to pick up Graham Gano. Why? Because they're just going to keep getting +1s. You're not going to get those field goals, in my opinion. So just keep an eye out on that. Anyway, that's just a kicker. Kicker advice. All right, let's move on. Number 17, Jarvis Landry. Now, many people might be thinking, are you sure we should start Jarvis Landry? They play against Kansas City, which, yes, is a great matchup for them. But with a new offensive coordinator, a new head coach, are we willing to really go for it? Yeah, I really think so. This offense is mainly predicated on the idea that Jarvis Landry is getting 10-plus targets a week. I don't think that is going to change. But by all means, it's not going to change. Jarvis Landry is going to continue to get his targets. He's going to continue to be successful within this offense. And I think as a number 17 right here in the ranking, that's a pretty good spot for him. If you are worried that the Kansas City defense is just going to completely tear apart the Browns, by all means, you don't have to start him. But I personally like him this week. He's my number 17. Number 18, we have Julian Edelman. One of my starts of the week last week. This is the first time I get to talk about him since that Monday night game. What did I tell you guys? Dude, I think my starts of the week this past week had some, was I 100% accurate on them? Ooh, no, Mustard. Hey, I warned you guys. If Breida plays, he goes down the garbage can. But anyway, wide receiver-wise, what did I have this past week? I had Will Fuller. I had Julian Edelman. I had, who else did I have at the wide? I had Tyler Boyd. And I had, who was my other wide receiver? Either way, I was pretty good this past week. Guys, I'm not kidding. Follow me. Follow me into the dark. I'll lead you to the right way. I'm telling you. Anyway, Julian Edelman this week. Besides James White, he's the number one wide receiver, without a doubt. He's going to continue to be used. Playing against the Packers this week, it is going to be a shootout. And they're going to have to call upon good old number 11, Julian Edelman, to make some plays. So he's my number 18 this coming week, especially in PPR, guys. He's a fantastic commodity in PPR. All right, let's move on to the second half of my rankings, my 19 through 36. What time is it? All right, we got some time. Here we go. So we're going to start with John Brown playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've seen John Brown be successful in this league, and thus far this season, he's been fantastic. He's a guy that prior to this season in his career has dealt with a lot of injuries. He's a guy that, if I'm not mistaken, dealt with sickle cell disease for a good amount of time that kept him out, and it hasn't been successful for him, but as of late has been good. I mean, this season, here's the thing about John Brown. If he doesn't get that big play, he's not going to be great for you, right? But that's the question. Is he going to make that big play? Is he going to be able to break off for that touchdown? Because that's what it really depends on. He's always been that. When he played for the Arizona Cardinals, if I'm not mistaken, was it 2015 or 16? He had that 1,000-yard receiving season. He's going to be able to recreate that. He's going to break 1,000 yards this season. The question is, for this coming week, is he going to be able to score or have that big play against the Pittsburgh Steelers? I think so. The Pittsburgh Steelers are not great against the wide receiver position. We saw that in the statistics earlier. And I think John Brown, Michael Crabtree, they have very good opportunities this week. That's why John Brown's my number 19. Number 20, we have Josh Gordon. As I mentioned a little bit before, this Packers versus Patriots game in New England is going to be quite the shootout in my opinion. I think especially if Sony Michel doesn't play again, the Patriots are going to have to force to throw the ball consistently, which is, in my opinion, where they are most comfortable. They want to throw the ball, and they're pretty successful at it. The fact that the Green Bay Packers went and they traded away Clinton Dix, that's either a sign that, okay, we're confident in the fact that our other safety is going to step up and be great, or that's basically saying we're packing in the season, we're just going to start selling talent. Now, whichever way that goes, I still think that Josh Gordon can take the top off this defense. He could have a good week this week in a shootout against the Packers. I like him. He's my number 20. Number 21, Kenny Galladay. Yes, we're all talking about Marvin Jones, especially me. I'm saying Marvin Jones start him this week. But by all means, that does not mean Kenny Galladay disappears. Kenny Galladay, we've seen him be successful within this offense. We've seen him be very, very productive in fantasy football this season, and I think he'll continue to do that. He is going to be a low-end wide receiver 2 this week, and going forward probably a wide receiver 2 with the opportunity and production that he's going to get. Kenny Galladay is my number 21 this week. Number 22, my last start of the week, if I'm not mistaken. We have here we have a little bit after we have my last start of the week. But anyway, we have Tyler Lockett. Guys, I'm still confident in him. I don't care that his reception line looks like a 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 3, 4, Okay, sure. He catches only 3 balls a game on average. But does that really hurt him to the point where you can't start him? No. He's finding himself open in the end zone. He's finding himself. The plays are being drawn up for him to score. And I think against the Chargers this week, he's going to find success. He's my number 22. Number 23, Demaryius Thomas. Here it comes, guys. The revenge game. He gets traded away after all the rumors, right? And Demaryius Thomas, in his first game as a Houston Texan, will be playing in Denver, okay, against his former team. I mean, you couldn't write the script. You couldn't write this story. This shit only happens in real life, right? So here it is. Demaryius Thomas, call of action. It's time to show them why they made a mistake in trading you. So, I mean, obviously they didn't make a mistake. Technically, they had to get rid of the contract because, well, they were going to owe him a good amount of money. I think about $16 million next year. And, you know, they were already admitting, yeah, we're in a rebuild. We're not going to be able to compete with the Chargers or the Chiefs within this division for a while. Let's go ahead and let him go and have Courtland Sutton get some reps. So technically it's not a mistake, but you got to show him what's up, Demaryius Thomas. You got to show him what's up. Anyway, let's move on. Number 24, Cooper Kupp, people. I'm telling you, I hope he plays. I'm assuming he's going to. Sean McVay says he has a very good chance of playing this week. By all means. They've been holding him out the last 2 weeks. Why? Because they knew they were going to beat the last two teams. The Packers are a piece of cake. No big deal. But when we get to the Saints, if I'm not mistaken, they're 6-1, right? They're 6-1. They're 6-1? Yeah, they're 6-1. We're 8-0 over here in Los Angeles, baby. Right? What are we going to do? We're going to fire up Cooper Kupp this week, and he's going to tear it apart. Cooper Kupp, prior to his injury, was the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy, if I'm not mistaken. He was lighting the league on fire. Get him off your bench. Get him off the IR. Let's get him going, baby. Cooper Kupp, number 24. Number 25, Sammy Watkins. Sammy, what did you do last week, dude? What did you do? Okay, so here's the thing about Sammy Watkins. If he doesn't end up showing up, you're getting 4 points this week. That's the issue. But, I mean, this Cleveland defense isn't great. I think the ball is going to be shared around a little bit. You know, Hill, Kelsey, Hunt, they're going to have great games. Just got to get 1 touchdown, Sammy. 40 yards and a touchdown. That's all we need, baby. Anyway, that's Sammy Watkins at 25. Number 26, my last start of the week, DeSean Jackson. He's shown that he can produce with Ryan Fitzpatrick under center. He's shown he can produce with Jameis. Jameis, who throws picks like he's throwing to the other team as if he thinks he's on the Bengals. I mean, DeSean Jackson, he's going to be great. They're going to try to find that connection early and often over the top of the defense. I think he's going to be a good play this week. Number 27, Amari Cooper. What have I done? Have I let my Dallas Cowboy fandom get in the way? I don't know. But I think Amari Cooper is going to be used. They're going to feature him because why not? The cornerbacks of the Tennessee Titans, they're not any good. I understand. You may be thinking, okay, Malcolm Butler, oh, he's a fantastic corner. He's blah, 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 blah. I don't buy into that. I don't buy into that narrative at all. He has been exploited all season long, and I expect him to be exploited again. I mean, the last time we saw the Tennessee Titans, right? What was happening to them? Tyrell Williams over the top? Mike Williams over the top? Really? They're good secondary? I don't think so. Amari Cooper, baby. Watch out for him. All right. Number 28, Taylor Gabriel. You know, I saw this thing on Twitter. If you haven't followed me on Twitter, at Kirchhoff, there you go. If you have any questions. You know, here, let me just mention this real quick. If you're listening in at this point, it might not be a bad idea. If you want me to see your questions, send it DM form on Twitter, because that is an easier way for me to answer your questions when I'm not home. When I'm not home and I'm at work, I go on break, pull out the phone, pull out Twitter, boom, I can answer your questions that much quicker. So anyway, keep an eye out on that. Anyway, we're talking about Taylor Gabriel. On Twitter this past week, I saw Taylor Gabriel put out a tweet and said, "Sorry to my fantasy owners this week, but we got the win." Bless your soul, Taylor Gabriel. That is exactly what I want to hear. I love that, right? You hear Todd Gurley all the time, guys. Sorry I didn't get that last touchdown. Just trying to get the W and get out, right? Great. We love you for it. But anyway, Taylor Gabriel this week plays against the Bills. I mean, what are the Bills going to do this week? They're not going to be able. I mean, we've seen the Bills stop some teams, right? But come on. Really? Come on. Taylor Gabriel this week, he's my number 28. Has a good opportunity to take the top off defense, make a play. Otherwise, I honestly could just see the offense being predicated and fantasy relevant within the backfield, whether that's Trubisky, Tariq Cohen, and Jordan Howard this week. I think those three are going to be good. It just depends. Where are they going to find the production? Is it going to be Anthony Miller, Allen Robinson, Trey Burton, Taylor Gabriel? I think Gabriel has the best opportunity to make that big play. Therefore, he's right here at 28. Number 29, Michael Crabtree. Playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Crabtree is decent, right? He's a decent receiver. That's why he's all the way down here. Is Crabtree good enough to be, anything other than a wide receiver 3, I'm not sure about that, guys. I can't trust it. Like, I'm looking at his stats right now. In the games that he has, 9 targets, he's decent. But anything but 9 targets, forget about it, dude. This guy's fugazi. I don't know. I don't know. I just can't trust him. I can't trust him. That's why he sits at the wide receiver 3 spot for me. Do I trust him a little bit more than Doug Baldwin, the next guy I'm going to talk about? Maybe. But either way, he's my number 29 this week. He's got a decent matchup. Just got to be able to find himself a touchdown in the red zone. All right, number 30, Doug Baldwin. All right, guys, here it is. Doug Baldwin hasn't done shit for this season, since 2017. Okay? So where does that leave me? That leaves me leaving him at 30. I cannot trust him. He's become the wide receiver version of Kenyon Drake. Unless he has 4 consistent weeks in which he's scoring fantasy points at an accelerated rate and being fantasy relevant, how can I trust him? I continue to, when you guys ask questions and ask, who do you think in PPR is going to be better, X, Y, or Z, and Baldwin's in there, I have an image in my mind of where Doug Baldwin's been a great wide receiver his entire career, right? But that's not the case anymore. He doesn't look the same. He looks like a shell of himself, and I can't trust that, and I can't promote that anymore. Therefore, he's my number 30. I may even throw him out of the rankings, to be honest. I can't trust him enough. But anyway, next guy I want to talk about, DJ Moore. As I mentioned, Devin Funchess earlier, the entire Panthers offense is going to be fantastic this week. It just depends who's going to get that production. But I think there's enough to go around against the Tampa Bay defense. DJ Moore this past week had over 100 total yards from scrimmage. Looked fantastic. Is continued to be used more and more as the weeks go on. He had more, I think his snap count was the highest it's ever been thus far this season. He's going to be the number 2 wide receiver. He was drafted in the first round of the 2018 NFL Draft for a reason, guys. DJ Moore is going to continue to be great. And I think this week could be a breakout game. He's my number 31. Number 32, Chris Godwin. Same game. But the only thing that matters right here is that Chris Godwin, with Ryan Fitzpatrick, here's the thing. All of the wide receivers of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Ryan Fitzpatrick have been better, right, than they've been with Jameis Winston. Even though Jameis has been decent, but they are better with Ryan Fitzpatrick. With Ryan Fitzpatrick, Chris Godwin scores a touchdown every single game. So are we going to repeat that? There's a potential. He's a wide receiver 3 in that case. All right, number 33, Courtland Sutton. You've made the trade. You have said, okay, we are confident in Courtland. We are going to give him opportunity. He's going to be successful. Well, prove it to us. He's my number 33. I don't know how much you can trust him. I know many of you picked him up this week. You might have to play him because of bye weeks. But I have a decent amount of confidence in him. All right, number 34, Jordy Nelson. Please, Jordy. Okay. Jordy Nelson. All right, here's the deal. This past week, okay, the 49ers, they played against the Cardinals, okay? Now, the Cardinals were able to get Larry Fitzgerald 22.6 fantasy points in half-point PPR scoring. They made good old Larry Legend, a guy that really didn't look like Larry Legend prior to that last game. They made him look like good old, reliable, the faithful, the one and only Larry Fitzgerald. Now, if we can make slow-ass Larry Fitzgerald look like a good wide receiver again, then why can't we do that with slow-ass Jordy Nelson? Please put Jordy in the slot. Please get him more involved and get us some fantasy points. Come on, Derek Carr. Anyway, he's my number 34. Number 35, Randall Cobb, was used at a decent amount. I mean, where did Geronimo Allison go this past week? Valdez-Scantling, Economia St. Brown, they're being used more and more. Either way, they're all playing second fiddle to DeVante Adams. But Randall, this coming week against the Patriots, could be a good game, could be a shootout. I like Randall Cobb. The last guy I want to talk about, DeVante Parker. Of all of the wide receivers, he, at least on the Dolphins, right? I know I mentioned Amendola earlier this video. Of all the wide receivers, he probably has the best upside going forth, right? So here's the question. Depends if you picked him up, obviously. But do you want the upside of DeVante Parker having a good game against a very poor secondary that has given up a lot of points to the wide receiver position thus far this season? Do you want the upside of DeVante Parker, or do you want the safe floor of Danny Amendola? It just depends what kind of situation you're in, right? And obviously, it's very subjective. If you're looking to, okay, I'm already down a lot of points after Thursday, I got to be able to, plug in somebody that's going to be above and beyond his projection. I think DeVante Parker can bring that to you. Unless you want a nice, steady income of 10 points, that's a Danny Amendola play. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Let me go ahead and get my thoughts in on the Thursday night game because I will not be putting out a quarterback or tight ends video until probably after that game has already started. So here's the deal. What are my thoughts on the Thursday night game? If you play in a 2 QB league, then perhaps you have to play Derek Carr, and that's okay. In a 2 QB league, if you play in a 1 QB league and Derek Carr is your only option, that's unfortunate because there's always potential for Derek Carr to mess up your week on Thursday. But he's a decent play, right? It's a decently advantageous matchup for him. Other than him, the only other players I'm confident enough in starting within this Raiders offense, Jared Cook, Doug Martin, Jalen Richard, that's it. Jordy Nelson is even a sketch play, even though I've ranked him within my top 30. Because of what we saw last week with Brandon LaFell coming in, scoring touchdowns, Seth Roberts being relevant. I mean, how can we can't really depend on anybody, right? Within this offense, wide receiver-wise. So those are the three. Carr, Cook, Doug Martin, and Richard. Richard barely. But it just depends, right? It depends on the game script. On top of that, going on the other side of the ball, who do I trust within the 49ers organization? Kittle for sure. 100% you should start Kittle, right? But other than him, I don't start Marquise Goodwin. I don't trust, Pierre Garçon. No Beathard for me. I'm not about that. If Beathard doesn't play, I might not even start Matt Breida. That is also in question. But as of right now, Matt Breida would get the start also. And that's pretty much it. Those are my thoughts, just so you know, because I will not be putting out a tight end and quarterback video. And that's pretty much it. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching. If you haven't already, please go down, click the subscribe button, and hit that like button for more content. Anyway, that's pretty much it. And until next time, I'll see you guys.